Hello and welcome to the first lesson of Up and Running with jQuery. My name is Imtiaz Ahmad from jobreadyprogrammer.com, and I'll be your instructor throughout the course. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the what and why regarding jQuery. And the ideal audience for this course are those students that have dabbled a bit with JavaScript, but if you don't know JavaScript, that's okay. Many developers out there using jQuery don't necessarily know JavaScript. We're going to be going over the important parts as we advance in the course. I do, however, expect you to read and understand HTML and CSS, okay? So what is jQuery, you might ask? Well, jQuery allows for dynamic behavior on a web page. I'll show you an example of what I mean by dynamic behavior on a website. Let's head over to my website. So here we are on jobreadyprogrammer.com, and I'm actually logged in to my profile. As you can see, that little picture, that's me. And when I click on this picture, notice this drop down appears. Right? The entire page didn't refresh. It just sort of appears, this drop down, and then I can hover my mouse over here and notice that the highlighting is different. Okay? And then if I click on this button, sign up to membership, before I click it, if I just hover my mouse here, notice that the colors slightly change. I click on it and it scrolls all the way to the bottom. This is an animation. This is dynamic behavior happening here. This is jQuery. All right. If I click on one of these options, notice that the enroll button appears, the colors change. If I click on this, enroll button appears, the colors change, and so on. Okay. So this is jQuery happening. And if I click on my courses, let's click here. And if I search for a particular course, such as, for example, data, notice that this practical data structures and algorithms shows up. Okay, none of the other courses appear because it's searching for data. So this is all happening dynamically. If I get rid of that, notice that all the other courses appear. And this page didn't refresh entirely. It's just sort of refreshing this particular area. If I type in SQL, notice that all the others disappear and you just see SQL here. If I type in Java, notice that the courses, the relevant courses appear. Okay, so this is actually jQuery happening. So now that you know sort of what dynamic websites mean, let's head over back to the slides here. So what is jQuery? It allows the developer to find certain elements on the HTML document, but that's not it. There's a lot more jQuery can do. It allows the developer to be able to change the HTML on a web page. Using jQuery, the developer can also have the web page respond to certain actions conducted by the user. So for example, you saw that I clicked on a particular button and it took us all the way down to the bottom of the website, right? Or when I searched for a particular course, those were actions that I was performing on the website, and the website was reacting a certain way. The website was responding to certain actions. If I click a button, it does something. If I type something, it does something. So the jQuery allows a developer to be able to code for those sorts of things. When a user clicks something, do this. When a user, type something, do that. That sort of behavior. The next thing jQuery can do is make animations possible. All right, we saw in our example, when I clicked on the sign up button, it scrolled all the way to the bottom of the web page. So that was actually an example of an animation. And finally, jQuery allows communication with the server. So if we wanted to, for example, save the data entered by a user into a database, for example, someone logging into their account, and we wanted to save that session into a database, we could send that data over the network and communicate with the server and save that information in the database. So the jQuery library allows for that kind of behavior. Now, for those of you that are familiar with JavaScript, you may be wondering, well, wait a minute, this is exactly what JavaScript can do too. So then what is jQuery? Well, jQuery is JavaScript. Okay, it's actually a library that was developed in JavaScript by a bunch of talented JavaScript developers, and it's meant to make a web developer's life easier. JavaScript is somewhat of a complex language, and to do simple things and simple animations, jQuery makes a web developer's life a lot easier. And jQuery is the most widely used JavaScript library in the world. A library is just basically a functionality wrapped up into code that other developers can use easily. All right? Developers can just use the jQuery library to add dynamic content to their websites with a lot less lines of code than it would take them using JavaScript. And jQuery's motto is write less, do more, which is exactly what it does. Using jQuery, developers need a lot less lines of code for adding dynamic content to their websites. jQuery is much easier to learn, and as we proceed in the lessons, I'm certain that you're going to fall in love with this library, and employers are going to fall in love with you for mastering it because it's being used in almost every company out there. So here's an example of write less, do more. The above section displays JavaScript code to iterate over a list of radio buttons to figure out which one was selected. The second section down here shows the jQuery equivalent, which does the same exact thing in just a single line of code. Now you don't have to understand what's written here just yet, but I just want you to pay attention to how much less lines of code you need to do the same thing in jQuery as opposed to JavaScript. Now, aside from being a joy to use, one of the biggest benefits of jQuery is that it handles a lot of cross-browser issues for you. Okay, cross-browser inconsistencies will drive you crazy. My website that I showed you a little while back behaves exactly the same way on my iPad or iPhone or a Samsung phone, as well as other browsers such as Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome. I'm using jQuery to make that possible. It would be much harder for me to implement using just JavaScript alone. Something that works perfectly fine in Chrome or Firefox could completely fall apart in Internet Explorer or an older version of any browser. So the jQuery team has worked really hard to ensure all browser inconsistencies are accounted for in the jQuery library. So any code you write using jQuery will work seamlessly across browsers, and this, in my opinion, is one of the greatest benefits of using jQuery in any web project. Now here are a few more things that make jQuery such a popular library. It makes a novice look like a professional. Okay, a novice developer can get great work done using jQuery. It's easy to understand and use, and novice designers can create professional grade dynamic websites. And not only that, it speeds up the development process, right? 5 lines of code of jQuery versus 30 lines of code in JavaScript. That's the typical ratio we're talking about here. jQuery requires a lot less lines of code compared with JavaScript. And then of course the no browser incompatibility issues, right? jQuery takes care of the inconsistencies of browsers. And then there's also great plugins, open source free plugins available, which we'll take a look at later on in the course. Hopefully that gave you a good overview as to what is jQuery and why it's awesome. In the next lesson, we're going to start our journey on the jQuery syntax. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson. Hi there. In this lesson, we're going to get started on how to code using jQuery. We'll begin our discussion by going over what is a target and what's an action. These two concepts are the underlying fundamental language components that you'll be using over and over again in your jQuery code. So it's very important to go over these first before moving on. And once you understand how to target specific page elements and perform some action on them, once you get good at that, you're pretty much 90% there in jQuery. So to better understand where jQuery fits into web development, let's go behind the scenes to when a user makes a request for a web page. Let's say a user navigates to facebook.com using their Chrome browser or their Firefox browser or Internet Explorer. The request is sent from the user's computer to one of Facebook's web servers. Okay, and the web server sends back various files such as the HTML and the CSS script files, as well as JavaScript and jQuery or images, all kinds of files. And the browser application that's running on the user's computer, that's the thing that basically gets all those files and loads them up. So based on what the browser receives, it loads the HTML file into something called the DOM, D-O-M, which stands for Document to Object Model. And this is how the browser is able to present the content to the user so that the user can see the fancy homepage for Facebook and get excited. The browser also loads the JavaScript or jQuery files so that dynamic content can be loaded and user interaction can take place on the web page. So the browser does most of the setting up to display the HTML document in a presentable fashion to the user. And it does this by loading the HTML file into the DOM, and this is what the DOM looks like. I just borrowed this image from wikipedia.com. So as you can see, it's sort of like a tree-like structure. JavaScript files can then be run on the DOM. That's where the moving parts of a web page and the dynamic behavior becomes available after the DOM is fully loaded in the user's browser. And again, what is JavaScript or jQuery really used for is searching the different elements on a web page and then manipulating the document structure. This image breaks down in detail the different components of a basic jQuery statement. The first thing needed is the $ symbol. This tells the interpreter that the code that follows is jQuery. The next big piece of this statement is the target. The target is the element or elements to be acted on. It's surrounded by these parentheses, and inside the quotes is a CSS selector. You can have one selector like it's showing here, or you can have multiple selectors, as we'll see later. Now, I expect you to already understand how CSS works, but if you forget, you'll quickly be reminded in this course because we'll be using a variety of CSS selectors. This selector targets all of the image tags on the page. Following a dot separator is the specific action we want to perform, and the action is executed on the target. So we're targeting the page, the images on the page, and we're saying hide those images. Okay, so jQuery supports a whole bunch of CSS selectors and actions, and we're going to be looking at those throughout this course. Now, here are some other alternatives to be aware of in case you see them being used in code. I prefer just using the $ before the jQuery statement as shown in the first example. But the rest of the three statements below are alternatives you may choose, and they do the same exact thing. I'll be sticking with just the $ because that is the most common in the industry. So again, what is the $? It tells the browser that the code that follows is jQuery code, and you can choose to have window.$, window.jQuery, or just jQuery. It means the same thing. Now, here are some more examples of basic jQuery statements. Notice that each statement starts with a $ and ends with a semicolon. The target is the first part of the statement right before the dot, and after the dot is an action that will be performed on the target. In the first example, it's selecting all the divs on the page, and the action that will be performed on those divs is to hide them. The action is essentially just a function that's being performed on all the divs. The second line of code fades out all of the paragraphs. Notice the p tag. It's supposed to fade out all of the paragraphs on the page. And the fade out function is being used here with an argument of 1000. And that's 1000 milliseconds or 1 second it will take to fade out all of the paragraphs on the page. Now, you might be wondering, where did these functions come from? The hide function or the fade out function. These functions come built in with jQuery. You can define your own functions too, but jQuery has a huge library of functions you can use to do all sorts of dynamic stuff on your website. The third line you see here is another jQuery function, which is used to add CSS classes to elements on the web page. And we'll go over in great detail on how to add and remove classes using jQuery in the next lesson. But hopefully, this lesson gave you a good basic overview of the jQuery syntax. This theme of action and target is going to be repeating throughout the course, and this is about 95% of jQuery. And my goal is to make sure that you get really good at selecting specific elements on the page and to perform a variety of actions on them. In the next lesson, we're finally going to start to code some of this stuff, so stay tuned, and I'll see you soon. Hey there, welcome to this lesson. Now we're going to get practical, and I'll show you how to download the jQuery library, as well as your development environment in which we're going to be coding up all of the code in this course. So you need a text editor first, and I'm going to be using a text editor called Atom, and you can find that at atom.io. You can choose to use this text editor or any text editor of your choice, such as Notepad++ or Sublime Text, anything that has the ability to highlight the syntax and it's easy to use. So I've already downloaded it here for the Mac. It's available for Windows as well as Unix. So whatever operating system you're using, this should be compatible with it. And currently it's free. Hopefully they'll keep it free. So I've already downloaded it here in my downloads folder. So let's go to downloads, and this is the guy. And let's just go to jQuery, type in jQuery here, and go to their website, and you can just click on download jQuery button. And here we have a few options. You can download the compressed production version, or you can download the uncompressed development version. This is going to be the file that contains readable code. Okay, it's going to be a much larger file than this compressed version, but you don't want to always be using the larger file because it's just going to take a lot more time to load in your browser. So I recommend downloading this download the compressed version link. Okay, so click on this and that will download the jQuery library. Now remember, what we just downloaded is just a JavaScript file. All right, it's a file that contains a bunch of JavaScript and it's compressed so that it's as small of a file as possible. So when you hear the term library, it's actually you know, a more complex way of referring to just a file that contains a bunch of code. Okay, so let me show you how you can use this file in your project and get going with jQuery. Now the source code that you download as part of this course already has this jQuery file nicely configured into the folder, and the files are linked together so you can get up and running. But in this lesson I want you to go through the exercise of setting up a typical jQuery project up yourself. Okay, and I'm going to walk you through that process, so it's important to try that on your own and follow along with me to set that up. And then the rest of this course you can just use the source code that I've provided to work on the different jQuery assignments. So once that's done downloading, we're going to open that file up in a text editor. So I'm going to be using Atom for this, and let me just close all of these windows. We don't really need that. And then I'm going to go File. But before we do that, let me go to the place where I've downloaded all of the source code for this course. So if we go to I have it downloaded in Documents. You can have it downloaded wherever you want, but there are going to be two folders for this course. One of them is going to be called jQuery Assignments, and the other one is going to be called jQuery Tutorials. Every lesson will have an accompanied source code with it. So if you click here, these are so far the lessons that I've completed. So for this lesson, just to show you how everything is set up, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it jQuery Tutorial N to represent, you know, just any number. So this is going to be the way a typical jQuery project in this course is set up. And I'm going to go in here and paste the file that we downloaded, the jQuery file. So that was actually in downloads. That's this guy right here. So I'm going to copy this file, and then I'm going to paste it in this jQuery tutorial N folder. Okay, and this is that file. As a matter of fact, I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it JS. This folder is going to contain all of our JavaScript code. So let me just copy that and paste it here in this folder. And I'm going to just borrow a particular file from one of these other lessons. Let me just copy this HTML document because it has all of the tags already set up. So I'm going to paste that here as well. So now that I've created this project, all right, this is going to be a typical setup for all the other lessons. Let me close this folder, and now I can just open that project by going to File, Open, and it's called jQuery Tutorial N. So let's open that and notice that it has loaded this project in our workspace here. So this is the HTML document, right? index.html, and this is the jQuery code. Not important to go over it right now. And then in this JS folder, we have this jQuery, minified jQuery. You're going to notice that there are some other, if you're using the Mac, you're going to see that there's this .ds store. These are hidden files, and some operating systems have these hidden files and some don't. But this has nothing to do with jQuery or this course. So we're going to hide these files from this text editor. Okay, this is sort of just a Mac thing. If you're using Windows or some other operating system, you probably won't even see this .ds store. So let me show you how you can get rid of that if you're using the Mac. You go to Atom and then click on Preferences and go to Packages. These are the packages that have already been installed in this editor, and I'm going to search for something called Tree. And that's this guy right here, Tree View. This represents the display that you see here. So go to Settings, and we want to hide ignored names. All right, these are hidden files. So I'm just gonna hide those files. All right, this is the thing you want to click on, hide ignored names. It's under Packages, under Tree View package. You want to click on this hide ignored names, and notice that those files disappear. Okay, so you can just click close there. And now we have the files of concern here. Again, you'll only need to worry about that annoyance if you're using the Atom text editor with the Mac operating system. Okay, if you're using some other text editor, you probably won't see that ds store file. So just keep that in mind. So this is the typical HTML document. Notice it has a head tag, and then the body, and then the divs and paragraph tags. You should already be familiar with the basics of HTML. And inside of this script tags, right, from here down to here, this is the JavaScript section. Okay, so on a given web page, we can put JavaScript, and we have to surround the JavaScript or the jQuery in this case with these script tags. So this is actually jQuery. All right, yours may look different depending on which file you copied. And the first thing we're doing here is loading up the jQuery file. Okay, it's in the JS folder. So in this JS folder, we have this jQuery 3.1.1 .min.js. Okay, that's the current version that we downloaded. It's in the JS folder, and we have well, this is actually a comment. If you want a comment code in HTML, you should already be familiar with this. You put an exclamation point and then these two dashes here. For now, let me just get rid of that. It's just extra code that we don't need. So we're loading the file here, and this is the jQuery file, and then we have jQuery code in this section. Okay, we want to make sure that we put jQuery code towards the bottom of this document. All of the HTML code, all of the different tags and the structure of the HTML document should be before this jQuery stuff. Okay, so that is why I'm loading the jQuery on the bottom here after all the HTML elements. Since this is a large file, it might take time for this to load. So if you have this on top, we don't want the web page to be loading because this thing is not done loading yet. We want to put that all the way to the bottom, and any jQuery code, we want to make sure that it's to the bottom of the page, because this acts on the different elements of the HTML page. And if those elements are not available yet, right, if the DOM is not done loading, then something like this is not going to work. So all jQuery code, just keep in mind, should be towards the bottom of the HTML page, right before the closing body tag. That's where you should be loading your scripts. My preferred route of jQuery is to separate the jQuery code in a different file, right? Not on the HTML page, but in a different file. So what we could do is I'm going to right click here and go to New File, and I'm going to create a file called fadeout.js. And I'm going to copy this code, because this code actually fades out the content in this page. So not important to go over what this means just yet. I'm going to copy that code and paste it in this file, and we can just close it. So this file now is in the JS folder, okay? And the HTML, this is outside of the JS folder. This is in the jQuery tutorial N folder, all right? So let me get rid of all of this other code. We don't need that here. So right now we're loading up the jQuery library. Now since I removed that jQuery code and I pasted it into this fadeout.js separate file, we need to link both of these files together. We need to link the HTML document with this fadeout.js file. So how do we link it? Well, we do the same exact thing that we're doing here. Right now we're saying that the jQuery that we need is located in JS folder, and this is the name of that file. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it down here. Remember, right before the closing body tag, this is the standard that's used in the industry, so I want you to follow that. And instead of loading jQuery, we're going to be loading fadeout.js. That's the file name, fadeout.js, just like that. So now if you want to see how this looks in the browser, all you have to do is navigate over to that folder where we have this index.html that's going to be in my documents, and go to jQuery tutorials, and it's this guy right here, jQuery tutorial N. So click on that, and this is the HTML document that we are working on here. So let me double click this, and that will open up our browser, and this is our HTML document. All right, if I click on each one of these, it's fading these paragraphs. All right, and that's exactly what this fadeout.js does. It looks for the paragraph tags on the web page, and then if a user clicks, it performs this particular function, and it's basically fading out in 1000 milliseconds. So it takes 1000 milliseconds or 1 second to fade out each paragraph. Okay, we're going to get into plenty of detail about what exactly this code does and how to code it, but I just wanted to show you that you can take jQuery, put it in a different file, link that file into your index.html document, and all of the other source code in this course is structured in this similar way. Now, just to prove that jQuery is in fact working, if I comment out this line, you can press Control and then the /, and that will comment or uncomment the particular line in this editor, and most editors do support this commenting. So of course, when you comment it out, it adds this exclamation point with the 2 dashes here. So this line is commented out. That means it's not going to be loaded. So now, if I go back to the browser and I load that file again, the paragraphs are there. If I click on each one of these, nothing is happening. Okay? Because we're not loading up jQuery. So this is a test to make sure that your jQuery, you have the right file and you have it saved properly in the right folder. This should be the test that you want to run when you're setting up your development environment. So let me uncomment that and save the file, and now refresh the page, and now you can click on this and jQuery is in action. Alright, so let's go back here. This is the file that contains the logic to be able to fade these different paragraphs out. So if I comment out this line, do you think it's going to work? Or when we click on these different paragraphs on the web page, are they going to fade out? Of course not, right? Because that logic is in this fadeout.js. So let's test that out real quick. I'm going to refresh the page here, and I've saved this file here, and I refresh the page. So when I click on each one of these paragraphs, it's not going to fade out because that logic is not going to load for this page. It's commented out. Now if I copy this code and I put it into the script tag like this of course is going to work. Let's go back to the page, refresh the page, and notice that the jQuery code is working. Okay, so this page is able to recognize that in the script tag we have jQuery code here, and the reason for that is because we're of course loading this file. If I comment this file out, it's not going to know that this is jQuery code. I've saved this page. I've went back to the browser. I refreshed the page. Notice that none of these are fading out because I've commented out the jQuery code. So we need this library at all times to do any jQuery code, whether we do it in this file or some other file. And it's in pretty much every single folder that you download as part of this course. So let me get rid of that, and let me uncomment out this line so that this code can be used in this index.html document. So hopefully that gives you a good overview as to how the code is structured in this course. Now, certain lessons I may have CSS files. So for that, I might create a new folder here called CSS, and in the CSS folder I might have CSS documents. And to load CSS documents, we're going to go over that a little later, but you should already know that as part of HTML. We're going to have a similar sort of thing like this to load the CSS, except instead of source, it's just going to be a href link. But anyway, this is the general structure for all of our projects. Make sure you download a text editor of your choice. I like Atom, and also try to set up your own development environment by creating your own folders and creating a sample HTML document like this, and make sure that your jQuery is working. The source code of this course contains this wiring of the jQuery code, but I want you to go through the exercise of setting it up yourself, downloading the jQuery file yourself, and coding up some sample jQuery to test it out. Okay, and you could just copy the same code that I have here on the screen as part of your exercise. Alright, so let's wrap up this lesson here. In the next lesson, I'm going to start going over the basics of the jQuery syntax. So thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Hello and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to learn about how to add CSS classes to particular elements on a web page using jQuery. And in this process, I'll give you a good overview of jQuery and CSS foundations along with HTML, and sort of fit all of this together and go over some examples as well as the Chrome dev tools. So this lesson will set the stage for the remainder of the course. So I've already opened the source code for this lesson, and I'm using Atom, and the way to open that is you just go to File, go to Open, and it's actually this lesson right here, jQuery Tutorial 4. Click on that folder. You should already have all the source code downloaded for this course, and then hit Open, and that should open up the code for this project. Now inside of the CSS folder, there's actually a CSS folder for this lesson. I have a style sheet defined. Now in this course, I already of course expect you to be somewhat familiar with CSS as well as HTML, but if you're a little shaky on those concepts, don't worry, we're going to be visiting those topics as we go along, and it should be a good reminder. But this should not be the first time you're seeing this stuff, alright? These are two CSS classes, and they allow for specific design. So this class, and you could tell that these are classes because there's a dot before the actual class name. Alright, if these were IDs, there would be a pound sign before it. So the ×2 class allows for font size to be doubled. That's what this 2em means, which means 2 times. The em is sort of a multiplier. So we are doubling the size of whatever font size this class is applied to. And then for this colorful class, whatever element on an HTML web page that we apply this class to, it's going to turn that color to pink. Okay, and then in the JS folder is the jQuery library, which is there in all of the source code that you download for this course. I've already set that up here for you in the JS folder. So in this lesson, we're going to be coding in the index.html page, and the jQuery is going to be in this script section down here. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, that I prefer having a separate file for jQuery, but in this lesson I'm going to show you how you can actually write jQuery code in this HTML, and then starting from the next lesson we're going to move on to the better standard of separating your jQuery code from your HTML code. Alright, so in this lesson we're going to type our jQuery code right here in this script section. Now the jQuery library is being loaded right here using the script source attribute, and we'll give the location of where our jQuery is in the JS folder, and this is the file. And then for the CSS, we use this syntax right here. Instead of the script, we use a link, and then we tell the kind of link it is. It's style sheet, and it's going to be a CSS. That's a type for the file, and then the href is going to contain the location for where we have the file. It's in the CSS folder, and the file is called style.css, and that means the classes or IDs that have been defined in this style sheet are accessible in this HTML web page. So we've linked to this HTML web page the JavaScript as well as the CSS. So we're ready to start coding jQuery in this script tag. So currently we have this hide functionality that's going to be applied to all paragraphs. So you saw this in the previous lesson. This is going to target all of the paragraphs on the page, and it's going to hide them. Okay, so the first part is the CSS selector. It selects all of the paragraphs on the page, and the hide function is being applied to them. So these two paragraphs are going to be hidden. So to see this in action, I'm going to save the file, even though we didn't make any changes, but that's a good convention. Anytime you make any change, just save the file and then open it in your browser. So the way you can do that is just navigate over to where you have the code. That's jQuery tutorial 4, and then just click on this index.html, double click on it, and it's going to open your default browser, which I have right here. And this is the file that got loaded, this index.html at this file location. And right now it's only showing this don't forget this one, right? This particular sentence is being shown. So let me close this for now and minimize this folder here. So this sentence is being shown because it's not a paragraph. All right, we're hiding all the paragraphs according to the jQuery. So this sentence is being shown. If I wanted to, for example, hide this, I could just put h4 in here instead, and then run this code again, and notice that it's showing the first two sentences here. We're hiding the h4 tag, and we're not hiding the paragraph tags. Okay, so we know our jQuery is working. So in this style.css file, we have two classes defined here. We have this times2 and this colorful class, and these allow for designing our HTML. So we can actually apply the add class method to our elements on the page. So for example, this h4, I can call the add class method, or function rather. This is typically called a function. We are applying this function on all of the h4s on this page. Now there's only one of them, so we're going to apply this add class function on this particular element, and we're giving the argument to this add class function. We're giving the argument of the particular class, and that's going to, I can give it, for example, colorful. Okay, this class is defined in this style sheet right here. Let's navigate back to our folder where we have the code, and I saved this document here. So now all I have to do is double click this index page, and notice that it colored this with pink. The h4 element is being the sentence in there and those tags is being colored pink because we applied the colorful class. Now let's go back to the code. We can give two classes. For example, along with colorful, I could do times2. Right, this is the name of the other class that we have defined in this style sheet right here. So that's going to multiply whatever the current font size is of the h4 tag, right? It's going to multiply that by 2, the size. So it's going to color it pink as well as times it by 2. So now I've saved this file. Let me open that up back in our browser. I'm going to double click the index.html, and there we go. It's colored, as well as the text in the h4 tag is doubled in size. Going back to the code here, just like how we can add classes to specific elements on a web page, we can actually remove the classes too. So for example, here to the h4 tag, we're adding the colorful class as well as the times2. I can remove times2 on the next line. So let me just copy this. It's going to be essentially almost the same code. Instead of add class, that method is called, of course, remove class. and I'm going to remove the colorful class. Okay, so here we're adding to the h4 text, which is, don't forget this one, this particular sentence, we're adding these two classes, and then we're removing the ×2 one. So now by the end of this script is going to execute line by line. So it's going to first execute this line, it's going to add those two classes, and then on the second line it's going to remove one of them. So I expect to see a small pink text as opposed to a large one, because we're removing this ×2 on the second line here. Okay, so let's test it out. Let's open up the browser again. This is that page. I've saved this HTML document in the text editor. Now I'm just gonna double click it here, and lo and behold, this is just pink text. It's not as large as it was. All right, we removed the ×2 class. Let's go back to the code. So just like how you can have two classes in the add class, you can have two classes in the remove class. Not just two, actually, you can have as many as you wish. So if we had some other class called, for example, hey there, right? If this particular class was defined in our style sheet file, we would have been able to remove this class as well if it was applied to the h4. Okay, so there's no limit to the number of classes you can give to add classes and remove classes. All right, there's no commas, just spaces between the different classes. All right, so let me get rid of that extra hey there, as well as this. We don't need that now. So moving on, let's say we just want to target this particular element on the web page, right? Just this text here, we just want to target this sentence and no other sentences. We want to make it large as well as pink. So how would we specifically target this paragraph, not the others, just this particular paragraph, and make it pink as well as large? So think about that for a minute, and then I'm going to jump in and do that here for you. So the way we would do this is we first need to reference a paragraph, of course, because this is a paragraph. And then notice that it has a class attribute. It has a class attribute. What is the class? It's called super. So I could do p dot, because remember in CSS we have to reference when we talk about classes, we need to they have a preceding dot. So p dot super, and then we don't need this second line here because the instructions were just to make that middle paragraph right here to be colorful as well as large. So this should target this particular sentence. Let's give it a go. Let's open our browser and refresh the page here, and boom, there you go. Notice that this is large as well as colored. All right, and we were specifically able to target the middle paragraph there because it has a class. If this was an ID, that's another attribute that you should be familiar with. If this was an ID, instead of dot super, it would have been pound super, because you reference IDs with these hashes instead of dots. So this, of course, is going to work the same exact way. Let me refresh the page and notice that there's no change there. Okay. Now let's say you wanted to target two elements. We wanted to target this paragraph as well as this H4 right here. So just these two sentences we wanted to target. How would we go about doing that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. We are targeting this particular paragraph, right? Let me change that back to class, because that's how you're going to see the code when you download it. And this should be a dot. So p dot super, we're targeting this. Now if we want to also target this, we need to add that to the CSS selector. So we need to first of all put a comma, and then we give the h4 tag dot super. Okay, so and then you could choose to have a space there or not, but the important thing is we need a comma to separate the two selectors that we are targeting here. If I run this, both of these should be colorful as well as large. So let's go back to the web page and refresh this, and notice that both of them are in fact larger and they're colored pink. Now you might be wondering, do we have to prefix the paragraph as well as the H4 And the answer is no, because both of them, they have the class attribute that is the same. All right, it's called super. So all I have to do is I could remove the specific tags, and I could just say, get me all of the tags on the web page that have this particular class, and the class is .super. So if they have them, that's going to be our target, and we're going to be adding these classes to them. So this should essentially work exactly the same way. So let me refresh the page here and notice that it's working. Now, just to clarify, for those of you that are very, that might be very new to this CSS business in HTML, this super class is nothing special. I made this up. Right? I can name this whatever I want. I can call this jigger, for example, and and when I run this, of course, it's not going to work. Let me run this. Notice it's not going to color them pink because jigger is not the one that's referenced here. We're referencing .super, which doesn't exist anymore. So if we wanted to highlight these, we would just write .jigger, right? So there's nothing super or special about that super class. I made that up, and I made these classes up too, okay? So we're giving these specific tags different classes, and that's part of HTML. You can give your tags different kinds of attributes, and we're giving it a class attribute. We can also give it the ID attribute, okay? So if I run this now, it's going to work because I'm referencing .jigger in the selector, okay? Now if I made this an ID, I want you to figure this out. Pause the video and try this out on your own. How would you make both of these be large and pink? Think about it. Try this out, pause the video, and then you can resume to watch my solution. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too bad. All we have to do is we are first of all referencing one of the elements. That's this guy right here, the .jigger. That's a class. We're targeting this sentence here. To target this one, we can't use dot because this is an ID. And remember, for IDs, I said it needs a hash. So we need to put a comma here and put the hash symbol, or the pound symbol as some people call it, and then write jigger like that, okay? And now we'll be able to reference, target both of these elements, and it should be working as expected. All right, there you go. So we covered a lot of ground in this video. We talked about targeting specific elements on the web page by an ID, as you can see right here, as well as by classes. All right, so we talked about targeting specific elements based on their tags as well as their attribute such as class and ID. And then we also talked about applying the add class function on those elements, as well as the remove class function. Okay, so these are two functions that I want you to, you're going to have to memorize these, and there's a lot of other functions that you're going to learn about in this course, and I want you to practice them on your own so that you're able to retain all of that information. But anyway, this lesson was, I moved at a very slow pace. I want it to be slow for those of you that are, that may have forgotten CSS and HTML, and this should have been a refresher for you, and hopefully I've brought back your memory on how classes are referenced and how IDs are referenced in HTML, and that CSS looks like this. Okay, if I wanted to create another style element, I would use the hash symbol and just name it, for example, jigger, and this would be a style element with an ID, and this could have the font size be 3M, as well as I can give it a color green, for example. Okay, now let's actually apply this on one of the HTML elements here. Let me comment out this line, so there's no jQuery being applied right now, and notice that this particular sentence I'm saying is with the ID jigger. Okay, so this should be colored green, and it should be 3 times larger than what the default H4 text is. So now if I refresh the page, notice that this is 3 times as large, and it's colored green because we gave it a style element called jigger and it's an ID, and it's been defined here in the style sheet. Okay, so hopefully this lesson summarized a bunch of these relationships between these different files, the style sheet, the jQuery as well as the HTML, and I taught you how to use the selectors as well as how to call the add class and remove class functions on the different elements. Now, one thing I want to go over real quick is that I'm using the Chrome browser. And for those of you that have a CSS background in HTML, you may have used the Chrome developer tools, but I don't want to leave out those that haven't seen this tool before. It's actually very useful. Please use the Chrome browser for this course. There is a tool called Developer Tools, and you could just go to this ellipsis here, click on it, and go to More Tools, Developer Tools, and this provides some really handy functionality. If I want to navigate through the DOM of this web page, I could just hover my mouse here and notice that I can go through the different elements, and it highlights the respective elements on the page. So this is pretty handy. But something even cooler than this is this console tab. And this console tab, I could pretty much write jQuery code. So for example, if I wanted to target the jigger class element on this page, which is this guy right here, this P tag with the class jigger, let's target that using the console. I could do .jigger, just like a jQuery selector, and hit enter and notice that it actually targeted that element. Expand this, hover your mouse here, and notice that it's targeting that guy. Now I could do stuff with that too. I could actually do .add class and give it the class, for example, colorful. Hit enter and notice that the color changed to pink. And here in the Elements tab, you'll see that the colorful class has in fact been added to this P tag. So this is pretty cool. You're doing changes to the web page real time without changing your source code. Nothing changed here. This is your static page. But in the browser, this tool that's available to us, we can use it to test out the development of our web page. Similarly to adding the class, I could remove the class by just changing it to remove, and that notice that it went back to black. There's also something called toggle class. So let me change this to toggle class. This is a new function that we may visit later on. Click on it and notice that it turned it to pink, and then if I enter that same one again, that same line of code, notice that it toggled it back to black. So toggle class is another method that applies the particular class, and then if it's already there, if this gets run again, it removes that class. All right, so it adds it, removes it, adds it, removes it. So you keep toggling back and forth by adding the class and removing the class. Now there's a lot more you can do with jQuery, not just adding classes and removing classes and toggling. There are a lot of other things you're going to learn about in jQuery, and you can test all of that code in this console. So I encourage you to have this fired up alongside, ready to go. I may bring it up from time to time, but for the most part, I might just be in the jQuery code file. But I want you to use this as much as you can and get the practice. This is a great way to practice the different functions and see your changes immediately. All the CSS selectors that you're going to learn about, all the traversing functions, the different effects that you're going to learn about in this course, you can test all of that stuff out directly right here in this console and see your changes in the HTML as they get applied. So pretty cool stuff. This lesson ended up being quite long, but we covered a lot of ground. So thanks for watching. I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll see you in the next lesson.